What's going on? Welcome to another episode of History with Harun. I'm your host, Timothy Harun. Thank you for joining me. July has been one of the most eventful months in recent history. So much going on, some of it very sad and unfortunate, but several of these events are very important as it relates to history. So we're going to get into it. First of all, thank you for joining. Please like, subscribe, and donate. Everything really goes a long way in helping me build this platform. You can donate at Cash App History with Harun. I'd like to say R.I.P to Sonya Massey. Her passing is very sad, and it only adds to the list of many names of people who were unjustly killed by law enforcement. Sonya Massey was someone's child, and she was also someone's mother. And the fact that she's not here anymore to be able to hold her children and be in their lives is such a huge tragedy. Sonya Massey was murdered during the early morning of July 6th after police responded to a call in which she had mentioned a potential burglary. Upon arriving to her home, there was two officers. One of them was named Officer Grayson. He's the one that ended up shooting her. He was essentially treating Miss Massey as if she was a suspect in her own home. And that's really not the best foot to start out on. And, I watched the whole video. It's very, very disturbing and unnerving. There's several things to point out. One is that he asked her, Sean Grayson, the officer, asked Sonya Massey to go to the kitchen and check on the hot water. Prior to asking her to go over there, the two of them, Sean Grayson and his partner, had already determined that there had not been a burglary present. So there could have been a burglary, but they determined that there wasn't someone who had burglared the house present. So he could have just left the house. He could have really just left the house. But he didn't leave. He asked her to go check on the water. She went over there. She picked up the pot. And also important to note that Grayson did not have his camera on. So there's that. We're watching from the vantage point of his partner. But she picked up the pot. She said something to the effect of, "I rebuke you in the name of." And, immediately Sean Grayson started threatening to shoot her in the effing face. And she fell to the ground prior to being shot. Prior to being shot, she was so afraid, seemingly, from or by what the officer said, that she literally fell to the ground. I couldn't tell if she was still holding the pot because at that point she was out of the camera view of the police officer that was with Grayson, but he clearly shot her several times after she fell to the ground. So this is, again, very sad, depressing, disturbing, not shocking, because these relationships between black people and cops have been fraught for a while, and often black people are assumed to be threatening even when they have no weapons. But this is very, very sad to have to watch play back. In other news, the cop is being tried with murder. So hopefully, he gets convicted of. Hopefully, they charge him with something that will either first or second degree murder. I'm not a lawyer, but hopefully it sticks. Moving on, in just as absurd of an event, someone tried to kill Trump. Yes, someone tried to kill Trump. A young man tried to assassinate Trump on July 13th. This young man's name he's dead now. His name was Thomas Crooks. And, this was at a rally in Pennsylvania. And there's so much to digest here. So many factors were at play. Trump had one of the worst security details. Former President Trump had one of the worst security details in the history of any security detail that we've seen. I mean, this was just egregious. There are videos of people attending the rally telling cops, "Hey, there's someone on top of this building," showing the video of the shooter on top of the building. There are reports that the Secret Service saw this individual hours using a Pathfinder walking around the area. There are reports that Secret Service potentially knew of him on the building minutes prior to him getting these shots off. So there's only more questions than there are answers. How was this man able to get his shot off, I think, is a very important question that needs to be answered. And yeah, I mean, it's very, very disturbing. He was, fatally wounded after Thomas Crooks was fatally wounded after, he let off shots. One hit Trump in part of his ear. One of the other shots fatally wounded Corey Comparator, a former fire chief, and then two other people were severely wounded but not killed from the gunfire that was let off by Thomas Crooks. And as of now, there's still not a motive for why this young man did this. There's only more questions than answers at this point, and I think, it'll be important for me to compile more research before I dive deeper into this. Also in July news, which doesn't require extensive research, everything on this guy is readily available on Wikipedia and Instagram. Netanyahu spoke to Congress last week, and it was a very intense speech. Only a minute into it, he decided to dive into racist rhetoric, so he didn't really waste much time. So yeah, this is him right around his 1 minute mark of offering his remarks to Congress.
This is not a clash of civilizations. It's a clash between barbarism and civilization.
Yeah, he wasted no time. He wasted zero time. And he brought Israeli former hostage Noah Arjamani to the gallery with him, and she received a round of applause when he paused his speech to acknowledge her. But I must say, it got weird at that point. There's a video online of Biden greeting a black person, could have been years ago. And in the video, the way that Biden is rubbing this black man's hand is really weird. It's just awkward. And we see a similar thing when Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu pauses to highlight this Israeli hostage who was brought to safety. His wife, Benjamin Netanyahu's wife, starts rubbing the woman on the back, and it got so awkward that the woman who was next to Benjamin Netanyahu's wife, grabbed Netanyahu's wife by the shoulders and said, "Let her arm go." Yeah, it was awkward. So I'm looking at this and I pause it and I'm like, okay, so who is Netanyahu's wife? I'd like to know who she is. So I go to her Wikipedia page. That connects eventually to her father's Wikipedia page, which is essentially Benjamin Netanyahu's father-in-law, his wife's father. I'm like, well, who was her father? Come to find out, her father is, or was, he's deceased now, but his name was Shmuel ben Artzi. And he was a member of a Jewish terrorist organization called Irgun. Like, oh, okay. So basically, before Israel was established as a state, a portion of it was under British rule. And in the mid-40s, Netanyahu's father-in-law, well, future father-in-law, he was a writer, an educator, but also a terrorist. And during this time in the mid-40s, the group he was a part of was doing a bunch of wild stuff, like breaking into prisons, shooting police officers, and blowing up buildings. But eventually, this terrorist group helped Israel become an official state in 1948. During his speech, Netanyahu went on to say that, proportionally, the Hamas-led attacks on October 7th that led to the death of 1,200 people was the equivalent to 20 9/11 attacks at once. So I decided to do some simple math. About 3,000 people died on 9/11. That's a lot. And over the last 9 months, the Israeli government has killed nearly 40,000 people. That's 4,444 people per month. So each month, Israel has been mounting a death toll that accounts for 1,400 more people per month than the total death toll of 9/11. In May of this year, the International Criminal Court applied for arrest warrants for both Israeli officials and Hamas leaders. Hamas is being legally reproached for their war crimes that they committed on October 7th, and Netanyahu is also being reproached for the war crimes he continues to commit in response to the actions of October 7th. Regarding these alleged war crimes, Netanyahu says none of the claims are true, and the International Criminal Court is just hating on him because he's a real one. It's important to note that a year prior to the October 7th attacks, Israeli officials received a document detailing Hamas's battle plan. Now, the 40-page document did not have a date for the attack, but it did detail point by point the deadly plan that Hamas eventually carried out. However, at the time, Netanyahu dismissed the plan as something that would be too difficult for Hamas to carry out. He just shrugged it off. During his speech, Netanyahu went on to say that the anti-Israel protest that was taking place outside Congress while he was talking was being funded by Iran, as well as nearly all the college protests. According to Netanyahu, anti-Israel protesters refuse to make the simple distinction between those who target terrorists and those who target civilians. Meanwhile, over the last 9 months, Israel has killed nearly 40,000 Palestinians, mostly civilian women and children. I could go on, but we need to move on to the next subject, which is Biden dropping out of the race on July 21st. I mean, this has been a very eventful month. Biden drops out. I mean, he was getting up there, slowing down. It wasn't looking good for him. And eventually he stepped down. The person that's taking his place is Vice President Harris. Who should black people vote for? A lot of people are saying that Vice President Harris played a huge role in locking up thousands of people for weed during her work when she was in California. Well, technically, she oversaw 1,956 convictions. And of those 1,956 convictions for marijuana, only 45 people went to jail. Now, that's not good. I mean, we don't want people going to jail for weed at all. I mean, people shouldn't go to jail for weed. We now live in a society where that is not likely to happen in a state like California. That being said, 45 people going to jail is different than thousands of people going to jail. Meanwhile, Trump wants to get rid of elections and give police complete immunity. So I think black people should vote for Vice President Harris, but under a condition. Our vote as black people needs to be something tangible. It needs to be something that we stop giving away. And there needs to be something that we can use, in essence, something that we can advocate for as a way of holding elected officials accountable that we are voting into office. You know, finally weaponizing our vote. And I think black people should weaponize our vote behind reparations. Conservative estimates show that $267,000 is owed to every black descendant of U.S. slavery. A defined portion of land should also be given for black descendants of U.S. slavery to live on. Israel has about 10 million citizens, and the country receives about $3 billion per year from the U.S. government. Black Americans make up about 50 million U.S. citizens. That's 5 times the amount of Israeli citizens. Therefore, the new black territory in the U.S. should receive $15 billion per year from the U.S. government. Please let me know what you think. That's been the most recent episode of History with Harun. Like I said, July has been an extremely eventful month with a lot of historical events happening. Please support, like, subscribe, and donate. And yeah, that's been another episode of History with Harun. Thank you so much for your time.